steroids, 2 CrossFit Opens in 1 year, changes in rules, and dumb movements introduced to the sport. These are a few of the things that we're going to cover today in the 5 more things that ruin CrossFit. Now, these are all in my opinion, so you can have your own opinion about these things, but this is what I think about the sport that I love. Firstly, if you are watching this video, but you haven't seen my original video of the 5 things that ruin CrossFit, check that one out. That will catch you up to speed of all the other things that suck about the sport that I love. But let's get into the video, and we're going to start with topic number 1, steroids.
But Ricky Garrard has been extremely impressive at the 2017 Reebok CrossFit Games. He picks up his 2nd event win.
Months later, we found out that Ricky Garrard, his performance wasn't legitimate.
Games for 2 banned substances and received a 4-year suspension from competing in any CrossFit sanctioned event.
The sample taken from Garrard at the 2017 Games tested positive for testolone and a beta-2 agonist known as Endurobol.
Now, steroids undoubtedly ruins every sport. Performance-enhancing drugs are there to help athletes get to that next level that is inhumanly possible on a physiological standpoint. When we look at steroids, we look at those people who are looking at trying to get that extra edge to be able to outdo their competition, to achieve the W or the win. Why is this different in CrossFit, you may ask? Some sports, let's say Olympic weightlifting for example. Yes, obviously steroids has a huge benefit when it comes to weightlifting. You're able to shift more weight, recover faster, etc. And you're able to get weights that are literally unachievable by physical humans. Are literally unachievable by humans. So you're a superhuman. But their competition requires them to do 3 clean and jerks, 3 snatches, and then they're done. Like, that's literally it. Something with CrossFit though, however, you have 3 to 4 days of competition spanning from 7 to 10 events long, testing on a multitude of things, including one being weightlifting, and other things like cardiovascular system, gymnastics, you've got metcons or workouts, etc. So all these different things that test your skills, strengths, and endurance. However, the one key point that this sport, my sport that I love the most, has over any other one is recovery. Recovery being the main thing. If you're a regular dude doing 7 to 10 workouts over 3 days, you're gonna be fucked. However, if you're taking Endurobol, you're gonna be fresh as a dog and you're gonna keep coming back and hitting workouts like you've never done one before. That brings me to Ricky Garrard. Everyone knows the story of Ricky Garrard, and if you don't, cool. Watch the Fittest on Earth documentary from 2017 and it will catch you up pretty quickly. However, long story short, if you don't have time for that, Ricky Garrard came 3rd at the CrossFit Games in his rookie year. Wow, massive. This guy was from Australia. Cool, that's where I'm from. I was like, holy shit, finally an Australian on the podium at the CrossFit Games. Fuck yeah, we've done well this year, Aussies. And then he got caught a couple months later taking Endurobol. So one of those things that come up, which is, I guess, the apparent reason why this guy has just went from like no one to pretty much the top of the game, is that he was taking performance enhancing drugs. Now, that not only ruins, I guess, the sport, but it also ruins people's expectations of athletes. Now, I don't think we've seen an appearance like Ricky Garrard's since the likes of Matt Fraser in 2014 and maybe even Patrick Vellner in 2016. Apart from that, like, there's been no other rookie appearances that have come up and just had the athlete go from nobody to podium position in his first year. Which unfortunately begs the question is, if it does happen again, are people going to be questioning, is that dude on steroids? What kind of juice is he taking? What drugs is he on? Etc. So unfortunately, steroids has ruined the sport that I love, and it's probably still in our sport with people that we trust in most, because athletes will do anything to win. Have a look at all these other cases that I've found, people getting caught taking steroids. Let's move on to number 2. Number 2 will be the CrossFit Coaches course. Now, I've done the CrossFit Coaches course, and one of the great things about the course is it is very short, very straightforward, and they teach you a lot of information in the 2-day course that you have. Now, the running joke that myself and Evan have with the course is that you're paying over $1,000 to get a glorified t-shirt. Why we say that is because a lot of the information that you learn from the CrossFit course, you probably already know anyway if you've been in the CrossFit space for a long time. However, beginners looking at becoming a coach, it is a great course to teach them all the fundamentals and basics of CrossFit. It is unfortunately a little bit of a cult meeting. What the problem I have with the CrossFit course is the movement standards. You're taught 9 different movements over the 2-day course. You spend probably about the majority of the time through the course running through the technique and the standards of the movements, how to coach it, how to cue it, and then you go into a practical setting where you actually perform, coach, and cue that movement. Let's give one of an example, such as, we'll say an overhead squat. Very, very common movement when we look at CrossFit, but also a very common movement when we look at mistakes in CrossFit. And the amount of mobility that a movement like an overhead squat demands from an athlete. Now, when running through the overhead squat, they teach you to have a good overhead position, obviously shoulders rounded out, and you're coming into a nice deep squat, staying on your heels, with your body pretty much being in a straight line. However, when they teach you, they don't actually teach you what to do when someone has a mobility issue. They teach you cues on how to help them get into a good position. They don't take into consideration if this person has terrible ankle, hip, or overhead mobility, which unfortunately leads the question, when do they teach that? When you're a coach, if let's say you've done the 2-day course, you come into your first class, overhead squats is programmed for the day, and someone is about to do their overhead squat and they're coming on their heels, and all you're telling them is heels back, heels back, heels back, toes up, lift your toes up, lift your toes up, and then it's just nothing happens. They don't get any better, they can't do the overhead squat, and they're just kind of like, well, fuck this is a shit movement. And then they have to scale to a back squat while everyone else gets to do overhead squats, instead of giving them the proper education on how to improve their mobility in their ankles, their hips, to be able to get in a better position in that overhead squat. You're just yelling commands at them and seeing if it fucking works. So I understand from the point of view they've only got 2 days to teach you, but I feel like there could be some better ways that they can run through, and even some additional education that you go through in the specific course to learn more about these type of movements. There's definitely many more things that I have a problem with the course, but they're just opinion based. They're not really something that everyone else would be affected by. That's number 2. Number 3, and this is probably the one that gets memed the most, new movements in CrossFit. Now, CrossFit has probably over 150 plus movements out there with different variations to every movement. You learn a snatch, you do a hang snatch, a tall snatch, a squat snatch, etc. There's so many variations of the same movement that you'd never get bored doing CrossFit because you'd have so much variety. I mean, according to Jillian Michaels, there's only about 26 movements or something like that.
So my issues with CrossFit are as follows. First of all, you've got like, what, maybe 20 to 25 movements?
Don't know where she gets her counting from, but not the point. The point is new movements in CrossFit. Now, with the release of the sanctioned events, which is the new rule change to CrossFit, there are 29 individual competitions around the world, each individually run by a different coordinator who programs for that particular competition. Now, with these competitions, they're looking at trying to get that extra edge over the other sanctioned events around the world, and they want more viewership, more people to watch. So how do they get that? Well, they don't make any event look any more interesting than it already does. What they try and do is add new movements. There's been some successful cases of new movements, like the double rope climb, and there's been a lot of unsuccessful cases. Things that just don't seem very functional. For a functional fitness sport, things like the flying push-up, the deck squat, the A squat, the reverse chest to bar, and I'm naming all these movements from Dubai, but they unfortunately are from the same competition. They test the athlete's ability to adapt to new movements with a short time domain. So all these athletes had no idea what they're doing, they've never done these movements before, boom, here you go. The problem I have with it is that CrossFit preaches functionality. I get it, it's a competition setting, and you're trying to test the athlete's fitness, but none of these movements are testing anything apart from how quickly can you make up, or how quickly can you figure out the easiest way to do this movement. And that was what the event turned out to be. There was 40 odd guys and girls trying to figure out how the hell they're going to do these movements in a very short time domain. You saw some interesting techniques, you saw some weird things that they approached, and I think, in my opinion, if they can't do the basic movements as a competition, adding these extra movements in is just going to make it Not as interesting, higher cause of injury, and just make CrossFit more laughable to the general community. Speaking of sanctioned competition, we're gonna transition into the next one, which is the new rules. Now, since last video, there's been a multitude of changes in CrossFit. The addition of sanctioned events, the ability to qualify through the Open straight to the Games, the wild card, and the fact that we had 2 Opens this year, well, this previous year. Let's talk about one at a time. So the new sanctioned event, I actually think it's a great thing for CrossFit because it gives athletes like myself the ability to be able to have a shot at a regional competition, a higher level of competition that has the possibility that one of us could go to the Games. This, for someone like me, probably be the biggest opportunity that I get in the space of CrossFit. That's a good thing. However, the thing that they took away is the way that you qualify for the Games. It was very simple. When you used to look at CrossFit, you did the Open, you got your ticket to regionals, you did regionals, you come top 5, you qualified for the Games. Now, there's literally 50,000 different ways you can qualify through the Games. If you come top 20 in the Open, awesome, you've got your ticket. However, if you come top 20 in the Open and you decide that you want to do a sanctioned event, you come top in that sanctioned event, your ticket gets passed down to the next person corresponding in that particular Open. Not only that, but the person, if you become a national champion for your country, you also get a ticket for the Games. But if you came top 20, that ticket also gets passed down the line of command in the Open. But if you did these sanctioned competitions and also won, that your ticket would get passed down to someone else, and then it turns out that 12th place at a competition somewhere in Uganda gets a ticket to the CrossFit Games. Does that make any sense to you? It doesn't really make any sense to me. Trying to work out who qualifies for the CrossFit Games these days is like putting your hand in a raffle and getting a free ticket and being like, you made it, buddy. Not only that, they released the topic of wildcard tickets this year, where they literally gave someone a ticket to the Games for no freaking reason. Here, they've got 2 examples of last year's CrossFit Games. One of them I fully support, and the other one I'm kind of like, probably shouldn't have done that. The one I support, which will probably be the one that people don't really think of, is Hunter McIntyre. I feel like when they asked that guy to be like, hey, do you want to come to the CrossFit Games? Well, actually, he asked them. He literally put this huge post like, you know, you're scared if you don't give me a ticket, etc. And Greg Glassman's like, here you go, have a ticket, CrossFit Games, there you go. I really enjoyed the fact that he did the CrossFit Games because he was a person from a different sport that came to the CrossFit Games and showed his fitness based on, you know, just his experience from obstacle course racing. And he did pretty well. He came middle of the pack for his first go. So that was awesome. However, they also invited Ben Smith. Now, Ben Smith is a notorious CrossFit athlete, qualified every year, but he just didn't do enough this year to make it. He had injuries, etc. But they gave him a wildcard ticket, which I felt was a little bit wrong. I felt like they should have gave the wildcard to the person who missed out in the Open by 1 point. That person who just didn't make the cut. Instead of giving the ticket to someone who didn't make it by a mile, give it to someone who was really close. That was just one of many rule changes made in this previous year. They added to the Games a elimination system, which did make things a little bit cooler, but also at the same time, a lot of your top athletes got eliminated for dumb shit. One of them being their sprint workout, where the last cut from 20th to 10 was a specific sprint obstacle course race, where if you put your foot on a line, that would cost you 10 seconds of penalty. In my opinion, it wouldn't take you 10 seconds to put your foot on the outside of a line. It might take you 1. I understand penalties are there for a reason to keep athletes within a certain distance, but that's a bit fucking ridiculous. These are just some of the many rule changes they added in, but they just make things a whole lot more fucking confusing as a community. I get it. It's a new rule, you should adapt to the new rules, and it's just gonna be part of your sport, and I'm okay with them. They're cool. Like I said, I love the fact that they released sanctioned events. What I don't love is the vague kind of answers they gave everyone, like, here, this is the new change, get used to it. We're not gonna really tell you how it works, you're gonna just kind of have to figure it out. For all these elite athletes who literally rely on this for an income, they were just like, holy fuck, I'm gonna have to eat fucking bread for the next fucking year. So it was kind of dumb, wasn't very well structured, terribly announced, and we had to do 2 CrossFit Opens in the same year, which, if you know, that's 10 weeks of stressful competition. Final topic of the video. We're going to talk about athlete bias, and specifically the fame card. Now in CrossFit, everyone has an even playing field. Everyone comes to a competition, the same point stands, and then at the end of the competition, you have a set amount of points that you've gained based on your placing. That's not what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about when the CrossFit Open happens, or specific competitions, and athletes get biased over other athletes because they got a blue tick and a fucking million followers, or they got a set of tits and ass and they look good for CrossFit. Why I talk about this is there was a huge situation many years ago, and it was with Josh Bridges. Josh Bridges, awesome fucking athlete. He's a Navy SEAL, he's a CrossFit athlete, he's still relevant in the sport today, and he has his own YouTube channel that you should check out. But Josh Bridges did a workout and he had atrocious form.
Boom. Roasted.
Absolutely fucking atrocious. Like, this shit was embarrassing. And he got penalized for it quite heavily. Penalized 15% of his reps, which in my opinion was probably not enough, but he still got penalized nonetheless. The same thing happened 2 years later to Brooke Wells.
In about 10 pixels. The worst camera quality I've ever seen in my whole entire life, and coming from someone like Brooke Wells, whose every single Instagram photo is HD, every single video that she puts on Instagram is HD, why was that video not?
Boom. Roasted.
Following up on this, we took the information shared on the thread and circulated it internally. The video was shot at a poor angle, which makes the review difficult. There do appear to be handstand push-up reps that missed the line. And in terms of the video verification following the Open, this video was submitted as a verification of capacity to complete the submitted score.
She had a very questionable camera angle, focusing on her workout, and CrossFit were like, no, you had the capacity to complete the workout. You can go to the games. Fuck you. Like, it didn't make any sense. Team Richie did a video about this, which was probably one of the best videos that I ever seen on the topic, but CrossFit just had this bias because Brooke Wells was just someone who makes them fucking tons of money, and Josh Bridges at the time was someone who really doesn't. They were like, you know what? That's okay, I'll give her the benefit of the doubt, but someone who definitely has the capacity to complete the workout, and we could see that he had the capacity to complete the workout clearly, he just kind of did dodgy movement standards, nah, give him a penalty. So CrossFit has this really big athlete bias based on those athletes that are gonna make them more money, and any sport's gonna do that. You know, if you've got someone who's got a big name, they're gonna focus the camera more on them. It's the same with CrossFit. When you watch CrossFit at the CrossFit Games, they only have the cameraed heats are the final heats of every event. So the main 10 athletes for men and women and teams, they will focus on that heat. The commentators come in, they start giving a good old rant and yell. They're like, fucking this guy's doing this guy's doing this. But then the other 3 heats that you see at any event, there'll be no one to be seen. It's just like a long shot of the event, and you just gotta kind of work out what's going on. So CrossFit definitely have this athlete bias where they only focus on their main athletes. You watch any of their content that they release, it's all about their big name athletes. They really don't focus on the little guy. And that's really hard. If you're not really good at the sport, you're gonna find it very fucking hard to get a name for yourself in such a saturated sport of athlete. That's my top 5 more things that, in my opinion, ruin CrossFit. What are yours? Leave them in the comments down below if you have something that you feel makes this sport worse than it already is. I love the sport to death. It's my favorite sport in the world, and I do it to the day I die. However, we do have to admit there are always going to be things incorrect about the things you love. If not, you're just literally oblivious, or you're a fucking zealot. Thanks for watching the video. Leave it a subscribe, a like, and stay a beast.